Eddie Hall's son just deadlifted 150 kilos, 330 pounds.
Come on, Max. Come on, Max. You've got that. You've got that. That's yours. Keep going.
While he's 12 years old. Personally, at that age, I was training my Charizard in order to beat the Elite Four. By the way, Charmander, best starter, this is not debatable. A 12-year-old kid is able to deadlift what grown men can barely do. And because of that, one comment read, if this was a random kid, people would bash him like crazy for horrible and dangerous form. But since Eddie Hall posted, people will attack anyone who points the truth. That was stupid ego trip, not clever way to do a PR. So in this video, I wanted to talk about all of that and analyze Eddie Hall's son deadlift, which is claimed to be an unofficial world record. But before that, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Pana. I'm a 2-time powerlifting world champion. I've been deadlifting for over 10 years now. My best pull is 300 kilos, 661 pounds conventional, and I did that at a body weight of 70 kilos, 154 pounds, which is roughly a 4.2 times body weight deadlift. So we can say I know a thing or two about deadlifting and deadlift technique in general. So now let's jump into the analysis of the deadlift. Oh, that's a grinder. That's crazy. Whoa. And he's not stopping. That's insane. So, in the powerlifting world, I'm known as the Grind King. It's not myself who said that. Some people say that about me. When I'm competing at the world stage or whatever, I'm always grinding out reps, especially the deadlift. So here, I think he probably outdone me in terms of grinding skill, because that's crazy. I think he pulled almost 20 seconds, which is nuts for a deadlift. So I really wanted to start this analysis by saying this, that's an absolutely insane level of strength and mental toughness. I'm stating the obvious here, but coming from the son of one of the greatest deadlifters of all time, that was to be expected. Now, we do need to review and talk about the technique. Like I said it in the intro of this video, one comment pointed out that, his deadlift technique wasn't really good and it was ego lifting, it was bad, it was dangerous. So, what is my opinion on that? The first thing we need to consider is that the deadlift is a hinge movement. That's really important to understand, because if you don't hinge, you'll have compensations that will take place on your movement. Most of those compensations will be excessive rounding of the back, especially the low back, that you do want to keep neutral during your deadlifts. That's why with some of the best deadlifters in the world, you can see some upper back rounding, and that's actually okay. And even if their upper back is rounding, their low back always stays neutral. And here, as we can see, there's a bit of problem on that area. Because Eddie Hall's son doesn't really know how to hinge, you have a compensation that's taking place, which is rounding his low back. And in my opinion, that's probably what most people are referring to when they say bad technique under the comments. It's because his low back is pretty rounded. And this shows that he doesn't really understand 100% how to properly hinge on the deadlift. Now, like I said, we do need to consider something. He's 12 years old. Again, at that age, almost no kid in the world is deadlifting, and especially not this amount of weight. And like everything in life, it takes a certain time and practice to be good at any skill in the world. So I can give you my example. I started deadlifting in my early 20s, and then I didn't know either how to hinge. Because of that, I would always deadlift with bad technique, my low back would get cooked, and that was a never-ending cycle because I didn't know properly how to deadlift. Then my back was in pain, so I didn't want to deadlift, so I couldn't improve my technique, and so on and so forth. So we do need to understand that if our technique isn't really good on the lift, first, we won't be able to express any real strength, And also we're increasing the risk of injury, and in the deadlift, especially low back injuries. So if you're like Eddie Hall's son and you struggle to hinge properly at the beginning of your deadlift, here are 2 keys that allowed me to really understand this mechanic and finally be able to deadlift good weights with much better technique. The first is called the wall touch drill. You want to start 1 foot away from a wall. From here, you want to slightly bend your knees, and while keeping your back neutral, you want to flex at your hips, and the goal is for your torso to get closer to the ground. At the same time, your butt should get closer to the wall, almost like a hinge of a door, which is why we call this motion the hinge. When you're in that position, you should feel a nice stretch in your hamstrings, your glute, your adductors, meaning you're really recruiting your posterior chain. You want to control the movement on the way down and on the way up in order to really own this motion and really dial in the hinge. Second exercise that really will teach you how to properly hinge, you then want to grab a pair of really light dumbbells and practice some Romanian deadlift. So pretty much the same position, knees slightly bent, back always stays neutral, and you want to flex at the hips, get your torso closer to the ground. When you're at the end of the range of motion, so when your torso is much closer to the ground than when you started, you really want to feel again this posterior chain engage, and this feeling is exactly what you should look after when you're starting your deadlift. Because when you're starting your deadlift, you're already in that position, and that's where you should feel all that powerhouse coming from your hips, from your posterior chain, which will allow for the deadlift to not just be a low back movement and not have all of the stress directed towards this area. So like I said, with Eddie Hall's son deadlift technique, we can see that he's lacking a bit in that area. As you can see, his starting position isn't as good as it could be, but like I said it again, it took me years as a 20-year-old man to learn how to do this motion, so it wouldn't really make sense to expect a 12-year-old kid to immediately know how to do it, especially on max weights, even if he's Eddie Hall's son. Now, if we continue to analyze this deadlift, we can see that in order to lock out the rep, he's hitching with his thighs. In powerlifting, hitching isn't allowed, and if you do so, this is called a no lift in any good, serious powerlifting competition. Strongman, however, it's allowed, and you can see that a lot of strongmen use this method and use this technique in order to lock out their deadlift. I don't have any problem with that per se, but here, as we can see, he's still a kid learning how to deadlift, and in my opinion, when you're relying on a technique that's really random and really makes your technique unrepeatable, I don't think it's the best option in order to learn how to deadlift. Whether it's allowed in competition, to me doesn't really makes a big difference. You should first learn how to do like the proper movement, and then use the hitch as a way to make your lockout easier. And that's actually why strongmen do it. It's because you're making your lockout much easier when you're using your thighs to help you lock the rep. The key to strength and to avoiding injuries in general is finding a technique that works for you and that's really repeatable. So you can have pretty much the same motion over and over again whenever you're training. So whenever you're doing your squat, you want your squats to always pretty much look the same. Same with the bench, same with the deadlift. So here, like I said, I would still say that maybe it's a bit too early to hitch like crazy with your deadlifts because you can lose balance, fall backwards, fall forward with the bar, with the straps and so on and so forth. And you know, that could lead to a potential risk of injury. So if we go back to the comment that I read in the intro of this video saying if this was a random kid from the internet, people would bash him like crazy for horrible and dangerous form. But since Eddie posted, people will attack anyone who points the truth. That was stupid ego trip, not clever way to do a PR. First and foremost, we need to discuss this. Thinking that you'll get injured with just one bad rep doesn't make any sense. Was his technique the best? No, we've said it. His hinge isn't really 100% mastered, and also, like I said, I think his hitching is a bit too much, especially when still learning how to properly deadlift. But in order to learn a lift, you need to practice it, and sometimes, especially at first, you need to practice with not so great form, and over the course of multiple training sessions, multiple training weeks, then you get stronger, and then only your technique can become greater. Imagine that when I started to deadlift, because my form wasn't good, I wouldn't deadlift never, then obviously there's no way in hell I can improve my technique and improve my strength. I also think that some people don't realize something. It's just one rep that we saw. We didn't see a whole training block for this kid's deadlift, so maybe 99.9% of everything else he did throughout the block was perfect, and then only for this 1 RM attempt, his technique went a bit overboard and he lost his positioning and so on and so forth. Eddie Hall is probably the best deadlifter in human history, so he knows a thing or two about how to deadlift, how not to deadlift, and it's obvious that he knows his son's technique isn't the best. But he also knows that it's not because you do one meh rep in terms of technique that you'll immediately and automatically injure yourself. That doesn't make any sense. He also wrote a comment under his post, which is, "It took me 15 years to master the deadlift. He's been doing it 2 years and still learning." He really wanted to share his progression, even if it wasn't his prettiest work. And in my opinion, that summarizes everything. It's just a kid who's happy because he's making his dad proud, and his dad is also probably proud that his son is able to deadlift 150 kilos, 330 pounds at just 12 years old, whereas most of the other kids are probably, like I was, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you view it, training their Charizard in order to beat the Elite Four. To summarize all of that, if your technique is right 99.9% of the time and 1% of the time it's not the best, you're pretty much good to go. You won't just destroy your back with one bad deadlift. And in my opinion, bashing a 12-year-old kid expressing the will to get stronger, to show his strength, to pretty much follow the footsteps of his dad, just because he had one rep that wasn't very nice or clean, to say the least, doesn't make really sense. The fitness community, in my opinion, should uplift those kids who put in the work and show the will to get stronger and do the movements that we do, like as powerlifters, strength enthusiasts, whatever. So to summarize all of that, probably working a bit on the hinging, especially at the really beginning of the lift, like probably setup thing, I would say, like being able to reach his hips a bit more backwards in order to really load the hips for the lift. Maybe, like I said, avoiding hitching a bit too much, especially when you're still new to deadlifting. If that's your case, I really wouldn't recommend you hitch at first. First learn the technique, then go to hitch. Yeah, crazy strength from a 12-year-old kid. And you know, it's a nice story that the dad is probably one of the best deadlifters in the world and the kid is really following the footsteps of the dad. When I saw that video, I was like, oh, that's really a wholesome video. So yeah, that was it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a couple of things. If that's the case, as always, one of the best ways to let me know is to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.